To do great things. This may be familiar to some of you. It might take you back to high school English class. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, the heart that fed, and on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of the colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." This poem is Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley, and I won't ever forget the feelings I had when reading and discussing this poem in a high school English class. I will always remember this moment as a sort of existential dread fell upon me in this class as I contemplated my own mortality, legacy, and impact. When you're young, you don't often think about how you will be remembered when you die, but in that moment, I had this deep, sinking feeling from this poem. Here was this great and powerful Pharaoh, by all accounts and his own belief and desire, the most rich and powerful man of his time. Nothing could touch his greatness, his vast authority and riches. He would be remembered for all time by people about how great he was. Or so he thought. Now just two vast and trunkless legs, a half-buried stone head, and a hand pointing out over ruins that were no longer a gleaming city. And I thought to myself, this most great and powerful ruler was lost and forgotten, buried under time and sand. I will never be any of those things. I too will be forgotten. I will never be that great. And my small legacy, no matter what it amounts to, will fade quickly, much more quickly than Ozymandias. Someday I will be completely forgotten by the world. Womp, womp, womp. It was so depressing and impactful, at least enough that I still remember those feelings and how I felt in that moment. The older I get, the more I may tend to think about these things. What does it mean to have a great life, to live a great life, to do great things? And perhaps importantly, what does it mean for us as a community of faith, a society, a species, to do great things? Well, for me, the answers to that question have to start with considering, what does it mean to be great? What is greatness? Is it really measured by statues or plaques or number of people who know your name after you're gone? Maybe a little. If someone is memorialized by others, they likely had a positive impact on those around them. People have chosen to remember and share about the great things that they have done. This is all well and good. But does this mean that greatness and goodness is only measured by how well known, popular, and famous one is? Certainly not. History is filled with nameless people who were faithful to following God's call, giving their lives to do great things, good things for those around them, silently shaping the world that we live in today with acts of love, serving others with compassion in the name of Jesus. And this distinction between fame and greatness is something that I was able to unpack in confronting that existential dread that I was feeling in the English class long ago. I was depressed and dejected because I had been conflating fame, fortune, and power with greatness and goodness. But then I realized I was never going to be a pharaoh or a king. That was an unrealistic expectation to have. And as such, it was unreasonable for me to be depressed that I would never achieve that kind of fame. And that was kind of liberating. We confront unrealistic expectations from society every day. And too often, we place those expectations upon ourselves and one another. If we measure greatness in ourselves and each other by the standards of this world, we will end up worrying about how many statues end up being erected in our honor. But, spoiler alert, and what follows may be difficult to hear, but the answer will almost certainly be 0. No statues. Perhaps a plaque somewhere for people to walk by and not read. If you were very successful, then something you said or did may end up as a footnote somewhere in a textbook, but that textbook is likely to remain on a shelf most of the time, except for when some future student skims through it for a research paper. It's been said that we all die twice, once physically and then a second time when we are last remembered or our name is spoken for a final time. The reality here is that almost all of us will face that second death in a shorter amount of time than any of us would probably like to believe. Womp, womp, womp. It's sad. It's a real downer. And it is sad, and I want to name that. It's sad to think about death, to think about this world going on without us. And it is much more depressing to experience the world going on without someone that you have loved and lost. It's a very real sadness. It's a sad and fearful thing that comes from love, from loving. So another poem. 'Tis a fearful thing to love what death can touch, a fearful thing to love, to hope, to dream, to be, and oh, to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings painful joy. 'Tis a human thing to love, a holy thing to love what death has touched. Each and every day we are living, we can be loving, and we can bring positive change to the world around us. And as followers of Jesus, we are not called to do so for statues or plaques or footnotes, but for love. There is not necessarily a correlation between how you are remembered, how ornate your tombstone is, with how great and how good you live your life. It's worth saying that there is nothing wrong with being honored or remembered, but to seek out and desire such a legacy, or mistakenly value your own life or others by that standard, misses the point. And like Ozymandias, even that kind of power will eventually crumble and fade. We are called as followers of Jesus to love God and to love one another. Oftentimes that is recognized and honored, but other times it just isn't. So this morning, I want to honor and recognize the capacity for greatness that lies in each and every one of us. What does it mean to do great things? It means to do good things, to do loving things, to make sacrifices and to help others. The world tells us that greatness means to look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Jesus tells us something different. Then he said to them all, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? You can do great things every day. In fact, I know that many of you do, and great things do not have to be big things. They don't have to be perfect things. They need not change the world or be remembered forever. Sometimes a simple or small act can be life-changing for someone else. The transformative power of God allows things to grow and spread like ripples of a stone thrown into a pond. When I think about something that just happened here a few weeks ago, that chicken barbecue fundraiser, I'm reminded of how great things can come from many small acts of compassion. Over $14,000 raised for Haiti Medical Clinic is likely to have direct impacts on the health of dozens, who knows, maybe 100 people. It's not unreasonable to speculate that when we're talking about medicine and healthcare, that someone's life may be saved as a direct result of supplies and support raised from that fundraiser. And here's the thing, that 2021 Elizabethtown Chicken Barbecue fundraiser for Haiti Medical Clinic is not going to be showing up in anyone's obituary. And yet still, certainly, a great thing. We can all look back and identify individuals who have had a lasting impact of shaping or altering the trajectory of all of our lives. Not through grand gestures of life-saving intervention or massive infusions of wealth. That may happen, but most of the time, through small, kind gestures at just the right time, or simple words of encouragement, or just being an example or a role model. Long before I ever even stepped foot in this building, individuals from this congregation helped to shape the trajectory of my own life through their volunteering and ministry at Camp Sotara. E-Town's Junior Camp Week and interactions with volunteers in future years, summer staff like Danny Byerly, they all played positive roles in my life. You simply never know how great of an impact you can have on others. This is why we are called to live each and every day with an abundance of love for one another. We will simply never know how small acts can transform into great things. We see this in the farmer who sows seed in Matthew 13's parable of the sower. Some seed lands in fertile places, some seed is cast into rocky ground, some lands on thorns or is eaten by birds. If we are to be like the seed sower, it is not our responsibility to turn every seed into a plant. We just cast seeds. We do not need to be great agricultural masters of cultivating every seedling, nor should we feel like failures because that's not what we do. There are so many things that are outside of our control in this world. We cannot determine all outcomes all of the time, but we can control a lot of what we put out, what we put into the world. We can choose to cast seeds of love, to sow into the world good things that can bear good fruit. The more love we are willing to cast out into the world, the more opportunity for growth there is. The more opportunity God has to work in the world around us. Great things can spring up in fertile soil, and sometimes even in places that we least expect it to. We are called to love God and love one another, to cast out seeds wherever they may fall. Now, it's true. We do need to care for ourselves along the way, not exhaust ourselves so much that we cannot continue the work. Self-care is important. And we have the right to protect ourselves from toxic things. But that's often different than an inclination we may have to pass judgment upon who's worthy of our love. Great things can sometimes happen in the most surprising places. It is not easy to try and offer love to others consistently. It certainly is not easy to love our enemies, but it can also be exhausting trying to weigh and calculate who's deserving and worthy of my love at this time. The sower in the parable just casts out seed. Maybe not intentionally to places it won't grow, but also doesn't meticulously avoid troubled areas that could have fertile spots. It is not always our job to judge and to predetermine how great an outcome will result from an act of love. We are called to love. We are called to sow seeds. Some of the greatest people that I know are great because they sow the seeds of love generously, not because they sow them the most carefully, pragmatically, or efficiently. Great things are done with love because, and I will say it again, the love of God is the greatest force in the universe. Indeed, Scripture tells us that it is essentially the only power that really matters. In 1 Corinthians 13, we read that you can speak in tongues or have the gift of prophecy or intellect or faith that move mountains. You can have immense wealth and boast of giving it away, but without love, you have nothing. But even with nothing, when you have love, you have something. And that something is capable of creating change. Change that can matter. Change that can be great. It reminds me of a quote by Mother Teresa that we can do small things with great love. And while some people may not consider such small acts to be great, they can matter a great deal to those whom they impact. So what does this mean for us as a church community? As the theme of our sermon series is, what's next? Well, we are coming off a difficult and unique time in the life of the church, of any church really, but never did we expect this pandemic when it started to keep us apart from in-person gathering as long as it did. And none of us expected to come back together and worship after this time away with such a major change as the loss of Pastor Greg from our ministry team. But with a new lead pastor on the way, a new building project on the horizon, we are really poised to do great things. These great things may not change the whole world, but they can certainly be a part of what God is doing in the world to bring about change. We can cast our seeds of love out into the fertile and rocky soils of our community and see what grows. We can engage in love and conversations with those who might consider us to be their enemies. We can enact seemingly small and minute changes in how each of us live our daily lives and watch for God to bring about good fruit from those intentional decisions. We do not need to concern ourselves with legacy. We ought to concern ourselves with love. At this very moment, there are adults and youth volunteers hanging out with children of this congregation, providing safe and loving spaces for them to grow in relationships with each other. Just a small act of volunteerism that matters to kids, to families. During this coming week, there will be a number of individuals who will give of their time to volunteer in any number of places. just this week. It'll happen next week too. There is not a single one of us this morning who should feel inadequate or insignificant in their quest to do great things if we are willing to show great love. Indeed, our only hope for the future is in the love that we pass on to one another. Each of us can do great things for others when we show love and kindness every day. And we can do great things together when we work with each other in community. If you are like me, you will continue to still feel a twinge of inadequacy at every memoriam reel at awards shows or news reports on NPR about how so-and-so incredible person, Nobel laureate, author, titan of their field has passed away. And yet, I had never heard of them before. And it sinks in. It sinks in that there's this feeling that this great and incredible life that was lived with a status and impact on society that I will never amount to. And maybe I too. No one will know. I won't be on NPR. That's okay. And I am becoming increasingly more okay with that. Because even if we do not end up with a statue or a plaque or a footnote, we can do great things. Statues crumble, and even the greatest lives and the greatest works are forgotten over time, but love endures forever. Stories get reshaped and retold over time. Ozymandias was also believed to be Ramses II, the pharaoh that many believe went toe-to-toe with Moses in the Exodus story. But we need not topple pharaohs in order to accomplish great things. We do great things by being centered on God's call. And like the hymn we are about to all sing together, and how wonderful it is to sing together. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be our vision, ruler of all. We have the capacity to do great things. Things that matter today, right now, for people that we love and for people that we may never even know. We have the ability to bring positive change in the way of Jesus, here and now, today, tomorrow. Let us do all things with great love. Big things, small things, all things. And when we do those things, good things, holy things, we will have done something great.